I'm George Fair. I'm the Dean of the School of Interdisciplinary Studies and Vice President for Diversity and Community Engagement, and I want to welcome you to our Accessibility Summit this afternoon. This is something that we have been doing for several years, and I want to acknowledge our major partner in doing this, which is Raytheon. And Raytheon has collaborated with the University of Texas at Dallas, the Office of Diversity and Community Engagement, for several years with this endeavor. So I just want to say thank you all for coming and being a part of our activities today and tomorrow. I'd like to introduce Douglas Green, who is Raytheon's Head of Talent Acquisition, Space and Airborne Systems. Douglas is an award-winning human resources executive with many years' experience in human resources, providing innovative, results-driven leadership that balances human resources, operating, and financial demands. Highly accomplished and talented recruiting leader. We have collaborated with this activity for several years, so Mr. Green, please come forward.
Thank you, Dr. Fair. Welcome, everybody. Can't believe it's been 3 years that we've been in this partnership. About 3.5 years ago, myself and I'd like to probably recognize a few people while I'm up here. So Jeff Leach, if you would like to stand and say hello. Jeff and I came over to visit Dr. Fair and his team to talk about people with diverse abilities and how do we partner and make a difference in some people's lives. Ultimately, at the end of the game, we want to hire people. UTD wants to give an education and see their students graduate and find employment. So it's been a really great partnership over the last 3 years. So I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Fair and his team for being great partners and assisting us in meeting our strategic objectives in hiring people with diverse abilities. At this time, there are a couple other people that I'd like to say thank you to in this partnership. One of them is Mr. Dockery sitting in the back. So if you could just say, hey, James, we appreciate your partnership. And then, of course, Rosie, if you can wave your hand, Rosie. Thank you so much for your partnership. It's meant a lot. We've been able to do a lot with UTD, and we continue and foresee the future as being bright. So we look forward to continued partnership. At this time, Jeff, Dr. Fair, can you join me on stage? So as part of this partnership, to help fund this and our partnership, I'd like to present this check for $5,000 from Raytheon to the Office of Diversity and Community Engagement for your continued partnership, and we hope that it continues.
Well, we would like to continue the partnership forever, okay?
Okay, gotcha, gotcha.
And thank you very much for this. This obviously helps in everything that we do, and we're just very happy to be a part of what we do with Raytheon and share these kinds of activities with Raytheon. And
Absolutely.
we will forever always think about Raytheon as we think about this area.
Excellent partnership.
Right.
Thank you so much. So enough of the formalities. We've got an excellent couple of keynotes today. I'd like to first introduce Ken Pugh, who is our Master of Ceremonies, Clinical Associate Professor and Master Clinician at the UTD School of Brain and Behavior Sciences. Dr. Pugh.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. Come on now, we need more than that. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. All right, now we're talking. Now we're talking. So obviously, we're all here for the Accessibility Summit. Inclusion drives innovation. So this afternoon, I've been charged with keeping everyone on task. So we're going to follow our agenda in a timely manner, and looking forward to the dialogue as well as the discussion as well as the presentations that we have. So for an overview, again, the Office of Diversity and Community Engagement, in partnership with the Office of Accessibility, the Office of Human Resources, the Office of Institutional Equity and Compliance, and Raytheon, will address the success and challenges of individuals who were told that they have a disability. In addition, a panel of accessibility advocates and leaders will lead a discussion on suggested ability, best practices, and tools and resources. Certainly through the work of the university, certainly through the work of all of our combined agents and our agreements, and certainly with the support of Raytheon, our goal is to create awareness for individuals and educational entities alike through a partnership between faculty, staff, students, and the corporate community. The individuals participating today will certainly be our faculty, members of our staff, and students as well. So along these lines, I will have a few words from student government, namely John Vandershans, who is a senior, who is majoring in international political economy and science. John, if you would. Okay.
Thank you. I've been asked to introduce our keynote speaker today, so speaking a little bit on that. Tracy Jordan, who's the keynote speaker today, is the Assistant Vice President, Senior Quality Assurance Analyst, and Accessibility Tester on the ADA consulting team at a well-known banking institution. Her education includes multiple degrees in computer science, sociology, and assistive technology from California State University Northridge, Brookhaven, and of course, UT Dallas. She's a certified assistive technology professional, is currently scheduled to sit for certifications in Certified Professional and Accessibility Core Competency, and also Web Accessibility Specialist. Life forever changed for Jordan in 2003, following a bite from a brown recluse spider. Her leg swelled 3 times its normal size as the spider's venom irreparably destroyed tissue. She endured 7 surgeries, the final one being a below-the-knee amputation on her right leg. What Jordan didn't know at the time was that the antivenom and massive antibiotics doctors administered were damaging her retinas and kidneys. One morning, she awoke unable to see anything but a dull, shadowy gray color. Although efforts were made to retain her retinas, her vision could not be restored. Today, she's totally blind in one eye and can only distinguish between light and dark in the other. Before the spider bite, Jordan owned a business in pet grooming. Once she lost her sight, and after successfully maneuvering through the numerous stages of grief, she reached out to social services such as the Dallas Lighthouse for the Blind and the Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services for training services and support. It would be unfair in fiction for me to claim that the path I chose for myself was easy and not rife with obstacles and roadblocks. But when life tosses you lemons, you most assuredly should try to make lemonade. But I chose to bake a lemon meringue pie instead, said Jordan. Jordan, the mother of 2 adult sons, said that her belief in a higher being, motherhood, and drive and tenacity got her where she is today, in the process of publishing her first book that is currently in the stage of cover layout. When asked if there was one sentiment that she would like to convey to her audience, she said this: "There is no one more equipped to speak on your behalf than you, and someone's perception of you is not a reflection of you. It is simply their view." With that, it's my pleasure to introduce your keynote speaker for today, Tracy Jordan.
Okay, well, thank you for that awesome introduction. First, let me graciously thank you for inviting me to come and speak today. I consider it a real honor to come and speak on behalf of accessibility in today's society, particularly in the workplace, since we are in Disability Awareness Month for employment. I was going to talk about my story, but he told my story. So I don't necessarily tell you how I got where I am today. I can tell you some of the things that got me through. He mentioned that I am the mother of 2 sons. I definitely went through those 7 stages of grief. And I was mad at my God. I was mad at the world. I tried, to figure out what it was that I did wrong, because the only people that had disabilities that I ever came in contact with were, far off in La La Land, like Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles. Those are the only people that I ever had came in contact, the only exposure that I had with people with disabilities in my world at that time. So it was like, what do I do? Who do I turn to? And it was very, very hard. I can tell you one day I fell in the bathroom and I was done. I wasn't going to do this anymore. It was just too hard. And my son, my eldest son, he's 22 now. He was a little fellow at the time, and he crawls in the bathroom, and I'm boo-hooing, and I'm crying. I'm feeling really, really sorry for myself. And you know, the old adage, out the mouths of babes, definitely applied here. Because he's a little bit over 6'3", so he's really tall. And at that time, he was going through that, you know, long, lanky, gangy stage where he could just walk and fall because, you know, he wasn't really into his skin yet. And he's like, "Mommy, why are you crying?" And I'm just like boo-hooing, you know, "I can't do this, I can't walk, I can't see." And he said, "Mom, it's okay that you fell." He says, "I fall all the time." And at that point, you know, it was just like that light bulb went off in my head. And my younger son, who is here, he's not going to stand up for you guys because he's hiding. He's a big guy now, but he was a really little fellow. And I was learning orientation mobility, learning how to maneuver in a wheelchair along with a white cane. And I was going off a sidewalk. And I went, you know, I misjudged, and I was in a power wheelchair, and I was falling. And when I say he was a little guy, he was probably 55 pounds. And he was going to catch me. I'm a big girl. I was a big girl then. So he was going to catch me and the wheelchair. You know, and I kind of pushed him out the way. So those were kind of turning points for me. And my kids still needed a mom. You know, they still needed me to go to PTA meetings. They still needed me to be in Little League. They still needed me to help with school. You know, they still needed a mom. So no matter how bad I wanted to just, you know, go into myself and say, "I can't do this anymore. I can't deal with life. This is way too hard," they kept me from going that route. So I made phone calls and tried to figure out, what can I do? If I had known then what I know now, I probably would have stayed in dog grooming because it's something I probably could have eventually accomplished. But I just assumed, not being able to see, that was not something that I could no longer do. So I got in contact with the Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services. They were very instrumental in helping me. I went to the Dallas Lighthouse for the Blind. They gave me a couple options. They said I could work in their factory. They do government contracts. Or I could go back to school. I did reasonably well in school, so I decided to take the school route. I don't know if you guys are aware, but in the state of Texas, if you are blind or if you are deaf, they give you what's called a certificate of blindness or a certificate of deafness, and that will pay your school tuition. And they also helped me with books, but more importantly, they taught me assistive technology. I had never heard of assistive technology. I didn't know computers could talk to you. I didn't know that you could magnify programs. I didn't know that you could talk to a computer and get it to do things for you. I didn't know any of those things at the time. But I was taught assistive technology, and I went back to school. School was a learning experience more than anything else from an accessibility perspective. Learning how to advocate for myself was the most important thing that I got out of school. Being able to have those concrete conversations with the people that you need to have them with, your professors. The Office of the Student of Accessibility, which I think is wonderful that they changed the name, because when I was here, it was Department of Disability Services. They were very instrumental in helping me also understand the importance of advocating for oneself in that particular atmosphere. So I went to school, got some degrees, and then I had to take on the workforce. That was very interesting. One of the things that I learned, because what I do now is called web accessibility. I'm an ADA consultant at Bank of America, and what we do is we drive digital client-facing platforms, ensuring that they're accessible for everyone. And one of the things that I faced when I initially was looking for jobs was accessible applications. Being able to fulfill and fill out an application online was a trial at the time because they weren't designed with accessibility in mind. They weren't designed for you to utilize a screen reader. So that was what got me in this field, was the obstacles and the roadblocks that I faced from an accessibility standpoint. So I took that, got some additional schooling. I know he mentioned that I was sitting for my CPACC, which is Certified Professional in Accessibility Core Competency. Well, I sat for that and I passed. So I have that certification. Thank you. I still got one more to go on the 27th. So that's how I got in this particular field, because of what I face personally in the world of accessibility. Things that I really want to get across to you, particularly when we're talking about working in a corporate atmosphere, working in academia when it comes to accessibility, I think it's very important that we implement a culture of accessibility. It's great to have departments of accommodations. They're very beneficial to the people that they help. But until we implement a culture of accessibility where people are implementing accessibility by rote, it's just a normal process, that we're having conversations with vendors that we talk about accessibility, that we have a checklist, and accessibility is a part of that checklist. That when you are sending out email threads, that accessibility is not something you do for a small population. You're doing it because you're looking at it from a universal learning perspective. Accessibility for all, a disability notwithstanding. That what you want to get across is that when I create a Word document, I want to make sure it's going to reach the largest amount of people. That you make sure that when you populate that kind of information, that you're reaching everyone. That you're not leaving anyone out. Yes, we will always need accommodations simply because there are a variety and a vast amount of disabilities out there. But when you implement that universal design learning and you do it from a business perspective, you're not just reaching people with disabilities, you're reaching people with different learning styles. Simply because you have vision does not necessitate that you are a visual learner. You may be an auditory learner, you may be a tactile learner. So when you address it from that perspective, you're reaching a large amount of people. You're not singling out a certain population. And that's one thing that I would definitely like to leave with you, is that I think it's very important that we implement cultures of accessibility, where accessibility is not just something you do for a small population, that you're doing it simply because that's the right thing to do. That when you're creating your PowerPoints, and you have pictures in your PowerPoints, and those pictures are very relevant to the information that you're trying to convey, that you ensure that you add alt text to it. And if you're presenting it to an audience and that picture is very relevant, that you are verbalizing that picture. So you're ensuring that you're reaching the largest audience out there. I cannot tell you the many of times that I went to different conferences that are directed towards accessibility that were inaccessible. I went to one conference where we had to go through the kitchen to get to the stage because it wasn't accessible for people in wheelchairs, and it was an accessibility conference. Or when you have presenters who are presenting in reference to accessibility, they're presenting, but they're leaving out certain populations. I went to one conference and they had a fashion show. It was awesome, I heard, because they didn't have a narrator or a master of ceremony to give a visual perspective of a fashion show. And this was an accessibility conference. So if we implement a culture of accessibility where you're doing it by rote, you're not doing it because it's something extra that you have to do. You're doing it simply because that's the process. If we're talking about the world of academia, professors, when they're creating curriculums, when they're implementing online academics, that they ensure that it's going to be accessible to the largest population. Not because you're going to have one student in your class that has a disability. You're doing it because you have accessibility in mind and you're trying to reach the largest audience. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan, for your inspiring words as well as sharing your story, because some of the things that you mentioned, I will certainly say that many certainly take for granted in terms of providing visual components to the nature of the work. And for the purposes of what we're doing today, I'd like to take the opportunity to describe to you that what we have on our screen, we have two screens, both show Accessibility Summit, Inclusion Drives Innovation, and today's date, as well as some information, colorful pictures in purple and pink. And the audience is certainly seeing that, and that screen, those screens are both to the right and left of you. So thank you for
Thank
your
you.
words. Thank you very much. I'm going to continue going, and oh, I'm sorry.
Dr. Pugh, we have time, if Tracy doesn't mind, to answer questions.
Okay.
If we have questions from the audience.
Fantastic. And thank you for saying that, because what I want to do for sure is, as we hear these great presentations, I certainly would like to have some dialogue and encourage dialogue through the presentation. So is there anyone here who may have a question for Ms. Jordan? Anyone? Or a comment? Yes.
Hi, Tracy. I'm retired Army. I'm a disabled veteran. I was working with the government in Washington, D.C. for Homeland Security. We were working on a 508 compliance. Is this similar to what you're doing?
Yeah, I do WCAG 2.0, which is Web Content Accessibility Guideline. It's a little more intensive than the 508. There's a lot of different more severity levels in 508. So you're ensuring that your digital client-facing or any, whether it's internal or external, it's going to be accessible to all individuals. So you're looking at it from a lot of major disabilities. You're looking at it from blindness, hearing, cognitive learning disabilities, speech, mobility. You're looking at it from that perspective. And so there are levels. There's level A, level AA, and level AAA with WCAG. And just ensuring that some of your user agents, like your browsers and your assistive technology, is going to be applicable to those web processes. And so, basically what we go in is we look at a web page, and we look at source code. One thing that I have found out, because we have a lot of campus hires that come in, and I do a presentation on diversity and inclusion to these youngsters, and a lot of them are, designers and developers. And so I always ask them a question. My question is, during your core classes, how many of you had core classes in accessibility? And many of them say they've never been exposed to accessibility until they get out of school. So I find that very interesting, since we do have, particularly in academics, that faces Section 508, yet we don't ensure that our students, particularly our students who are developers and designers, who are coders, are not facing accessibility. So that's pretty much what I do.
That's great. And just last question. Mm-hmm. How do you see this progressing in terms of an evolution? Because it sounds like kind of see eye to eye, if you will, on this, that eventually this will progress to where it's as natural as breathing, bringing in people with disabilities because of the enabling technologies and processes that allow that, and there really is no distinction between somebody who's disabled or somebody who's has full faculties of their body.
Honestly, at the rate that we're going now, even though we have WCAG and we have Section 508, so we have these legal mandates in place. However, we have a lot of disconnect out there. When you're talking about software, for instance, let's just pick software. So when you're talking about software, for instance, you have vendors out there who have no desire, they have no inclination, they have no motivation to ensure that their software applications are accessible. And the root cause of that is the people that are purchasing the software not, demanding that accessibility be a part of that protocol. So until we get to the point where we are like, you know what, we're not dealing with you because we want to make sure that this software is going to be accessible to all. That's what I face all the time. Software that we're implementing that's not going to be accessible to a certain population. Understanding that, from WCAG, you're looking at it from a lot of different perspectives. I think even though I see it, it's just really clear to me populating a culture of accessibility. That, when you're hiring people and you're ensuring that they know how to use Word, and you're ensuring that they know how to use Excel and PowerPoint and different software applications, but you're not assuring the accessibility protocols that are right there with those applications. You're not assuring that when you're having professors stand in front of a classroom, you're not ensuring that they're providing the most accessible platform to their students that they can. Because their attitude is simply really simple, this is something extra that I have to do. So I see it as something that has to happen. Will it happen in my lifetime? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's wonderful that it is happening, that people see it as it is. I mean, I do a lot of different presentations. I try to break it down to the most, common denominator. I do a lot of things where I have presentations where I make my classroom disabled. Just for that hour and a half, whether we're putting, something over their eyes, whether we're distorting their computer, or we're putting them in a wheelchair, just to give them that perspective, of how do you accomplish something if you have this particular limitation. So from an evolutional standpoint, I think we have a long way to go.
Thank you.
Question back here.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you for sharing your story. That was very inspiring to hear. I wonder, what are some maybe words or phrases that are more compassionate to use and words to avoid when we're talking about this community?
Thank you. I speak on inclusive language a lot. I have a list of words that I try to ensure people don't use, words like special when referring to someone. I work in an environment where there is a diverse culture. So a lot of times people haven't been exposed to what we consider as PC language. Handicap is not one of my favorite words, particularly when you think about the root of the word. I'm not great with disabled either. I'd rather say ability. Let me see, what else? Slow, mentally retarded. Those are some of my no-no words. My favorite no-no word is when people come up to me and say, how long have you been confined to a wheelchair? Or how long have you been wheelchair bound? And explaining to them that my wheelchair is my mobility device. I'm not confined to it, nor am I bound to it. So I think inclusive language is very important, particularly in the corporate world, particularly in academics, particularly in the community. That learning to use that PC language, but more importantly, if you're dealing directly with a person who may or may not have a disability, the first thing to ask is what you just asked me. What do you prefer? Because people prefer different things. A lot of people are really good with handicap. They have no problem with that word. A lot of people are good with disabled. So you just have to ask the individual, particularly when you're dealing one-on-one, particularly when you're dealing with a small audience, you need to inquire of the individual, what do they prefer? Because people prefer different things, and you are dealing with a diverse population of people. So those are some of the words that I would exclude from your lingo, if possible. But more importantly, I believe in people first language. I think it's important that you acknowledge the person before you acknowledge a disability. I've been called the blind lady. I've been called, the blind lady in the wheelchair. I have been called that quite often. So I think it's just important that you acknowledge me as a person first, because that's what I am. And acknowledging my disability, unless it's absolutely necessary, don't acknowledge it at all. Did I answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Sure. Any more questions?
Question right there.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I work here in Student Affairs. And for my students, what advice would you give for students who need assistance with self-advocacy? I've done some meetings with some of my students, and some of them are nervous about approaching their professors regarding their own needs. So what are some tools they can have in their back pocket to advocate for themselves before they find sources of support?
Okay. Most importantly, you need to keep in mind that professors are scary people. Okay, so you have a lot of students, whether they have a disability or not, who are a little bit hesitant to have a conversation with a professor because, you put them on a pedestal. It's kind of like doctors. You kind of put them on a pedestal. You think they know all and seeing all of everything. So that's a normal reaction to talking to a professor. But what's more important is letting them understand that especially if you're talking about students with disabilities, and if you're talking about students who don't have disabilities, letting them understand that no one can speak better on their behalf than them. They understand better than anyone their abilities, their challenges, their limitations, their weaknesses, and their strengths. They understand that. So I know that a lot of times, especially with departments of accessibility, they get a lot of students who are under the impression that that department is there to stand in front of them and speak for them on their behalf. But I think the most important thing to get across to that particular student, whether we're talking about a student with a disability or a student without a disability, that they are their best advocate. You understand what you need. You're going to have to be able to convey that successfully to whoever you're having a conversation with. So getting them to understand first and foremost that professors are people. They're not someone to fear. They're not someone who's going to hold your grade over your head. As long as you're doing your very best, you're going to accomplish what you set out to accomplish. But getting them to be able to calmly have a conversation with another person is what you need to convey to them, because that's what they're doing. They're just having a conversation with another person. They're the ones who have, made the professors seem bigger than they are, simply because they are professors. And trust me, that was something that I had to learn myself as a student, understanding that I'm just having a conversation with another person. So I think that's the best tool that you can give to them, is taking away the fear that they have because they are having a conversation with a professor. Now, if you're dealing with a student who has just issues just having conversations, that's a different ball of wax. Any more questions?
Question? Right down here in front.
I'm okay. I don't need the microphone. Thank you. Hi, Tracy. So my name's
Hi.
Connor Dizor, and I work in university housing, so student housing on campus. And recently, over the past, I'd say 20 years, there's been a lot of forward progress with university housing, especially whenever it comes to meeting students' needs for accessibility. But there's always room for improvement and room to grow. So just in housing in general, what advice could you give for a professional to look out for in terms of accessibility with housing?
From that perspective, I would just definitely tell you to look at it from an individual basis, because you're dealing with a vast amount of disabilities. And also, I really want to point this out because I worked in an academic setting for 3 years, so I dealt with a lot of students. You're going to get a lot of students who are going to give you, I want to say, like untrue scenarios. So for instance, them having pets that are companions and they're not working animals is not acceptable, okay? Being able to, and I think the best thing for you to have is for you to understand the law. So you know that you're not making exceptions that are not acceptable simply because a student came to you and says, this is what I need, okay? You want to ensure that you are definitely providing the accommodations that they require, but they're not accommodations that are particular to that student because it's something they want. So I've had conversations with, and let me give you just an idea of what I'm talking about. I was asked to come and speak at a university in front of a disciplinary board. And what they wanted me to speak on was the student had a piece of assistive technology. And they were not sure if the student was cheating or not. Short end of the story, yeah, the student was cheating. But the bigger picture was they didn't know what the piece of equipment did. Therefore, their department, their testing department, was not able to successfully ascertain that this piece of equipment didn't need to be in the room with the student. So yes, definitely, direct your attention towards whatever disciplinary actions that student deserves. But the bigger problem is the lack of knowledge of your testing department. And this was not a testing department for, just all students. This was a testing department specifically for students with disabilities. So my issue was, the student's cheating. Yeah, you need to direct your attention towards that and put down whatever disciplinary actions you need to address. But the bigger picture is the simple fact that you guys did not know she was cheating simply because you didn't know what the AT did. So having that foreknowledge of if the student is asking for something specific, is it addressing whatever issue that it's supposed to address? So if you have a student who's telling you they don't want a roommate and they're giving you their disability as a reason why, then my biggest suggestion would be for you to address that and see if that's actually applicable.
Thank you.
Question, other question here in the front, if you would.
Hi, Ms. Jordan. I had spoken with you about a year ago through email, but I just wanted to comment that you are a real inspiration for someone like myself, who also lost their vision late in life and just decided to go back to school. I'm approaching the last 2 years of my degree, and
Cool.
I'm, starting to look at internships and the workforce, and I'm very insecure about it. But I didn't know if you could have any points to kind of overcome that when I'm entering those environments.
Okay, are you talking about the interviewing process? Are you talking about the interviewing process? Let me tell you, I've had a number of interviews. And a lot of times, particularly when you're in an interview setting, a lot of times the people that are interviewing you are more nervous than you are. And that's something you definitely need to keep in mind, that once again, you're having a conversation with another person, okay? And when I say that you're more equipped to ascertain your abilities than anyone else, you go in there and if you're interviewing for a job and you know that job, and you know you can do that job, that's gonna come across in that interview. Being able to address those questions that they give you, but more importantly, being able to ask those concrete questions is also important too. Being able to ascertain those questions and understand that you're talking to another person, but you want to be able to ask those questions because you know what you're going to require in order to do that job. So you need to make sure that their internal processes are going to be applicable to you, because you don't want to go into an environment where everything is not going to be accessible to you, because you're just in an environment that's not accessible to you. So you need to ask those questions. You need to make sure that if I want to take on this internship, I want to make sure that I am going to be inclusive to this entity, that I am going to be able to not just receive, but I'm going to be able to provide. And you can't do that if things are not going to be accessible to you. So you need to ask those questions also. So if you're feeling a little nervous, you're feeling a little insecure about that, my biggest suggestion to you would be to ensure, first of all, that you're going to go into a work environment that's going to be applicable to you. You do not want to get into a work environment where you're constantly in accommodations, where you're constantly saying this application is not accessible, I can't do my job. So you want to definitely ascertain that for yourself. That way you are going to be beneficial not just to yourself, but you're going to be beneficial to whomever you're working for also. Any other questions?
I do, I have one, Ken Pugh again. Your work in quality assurance and as a tester in Bank of America, could you share with us some improvements that you've seen in the banking industry in terms of accessibility?
Absolutely.
Or some challenges that you've seen?
Sure.
Or some work that you've contributed to, or some successes that you've seen in Bank of America, or just banking in general?
Sure. How many people have an iPhone? If you guys are raising your hands, man. So many people say, so pretty much you guys have an iPhone or an Android phone, right? Yes. Okay, well, Bank of America's app is extremely accessible. Simply because it was designed with accessibility in mind. And that's one of the things that we work on at Bank of America, ensuring that our digital client-facing applications are going to be accessible to our clients as well as our associates. And that's one of the things that I do at Bank of America, is ensuring that accessibility protocols are in place. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at code. I'm ensuring that, yeah, you did that HTML format really, really good, or the PHP format really, really good, but did you have to add ARIA to it in order to make sure that those labels are going to be rendered correctly? Did you ensure that if you have a person who is a keyboard-only user is going to be able to maneuver through that process with a keyboard, not utilizing a mouse at all? Ensuring that if you're dealing with an individual who may be colorblind, that your color content is not going to distort. Ensuring that those applications where you have flashes don't have certain color content in them that are going to, implement a person into having a seizure. Those are the kind of things that we do at Bank of America, that I do as a consultant, having those concrete conversations with those developers and those designers, and the stuff that they design and they're very proud of, and they get really ticked off when you go in there and say, you gotta redo this. This is not gonna work. So those are the kind of conversations that I'm having. In the banking industry, because it's very important, I can say that from a legal standpoint, there have been a lot of lawsuits, and I think that's been kind of instrumental in ensuring that a lot of industries have gotten on the bandwagon, ensuring that accessibility is something that's being put in place. Nobody wants to be sued, not just from the monetary loss, but also from a PR standpoint. Nobody wants that on their backs. So to answer your question about the way the industry is looking at it, they're looking at it, what I think is awesome, they're not looking at it from a numbers perspective. They're not saying, well, this is how many people who use our app that's using VoiceOver, or how many people that's using our app that's adding a assistive technology like a switch, or they're using a laser. They're not looking at it from that perspective. They're looking at it from, these are our clients, these are our consumers, and we want to ensure that we are providing accessibility to all. From a banking industry, because we do a lot of, sneak peeks at other apps, we're looking at other banks' apps, and I think everybody is getting the same perspective, ensuring that accessibility accessibility is being driven, that they're making sure that those web applications are accessible, whether we're looking at it from mobility, we're looking at it from a mobile perspective, a responsive web design, or desktop. We're ensuring that those applications are going to be rendered successfully, ensuring that, people with disabilities make money just like everybody else, ensuring that they're able to deposit, they're able to successfully transfer money. They can have those chat conversations. All those things have to be taken into place, and you have to look at it from a multiple of disabilities. When you're looking at it from an accessibility standpoint, you want to ensure that they're going to be accessible to all. And I think I love working at Bank of America because that's a prime objective of Bank of America. So, does that answer your question? Yeah. Any more questions?
Questions? There in the back there.
Hi, Tracy. How are you?
I'm peachy. How are you?
Wonderful. And I'm in a blue polo and khakis, if it helps.
Thank you.
Welcome. So I'm actually here on behalf, we're actually here with GameStop. We've recently launched an employee resource group for the disabled, and I'm the leader of that group. And I actually came here today, and I have two questions. One, how could you see retail evolve to better support those with different disabilities? And two, for a company that's beginning to implement this culture, how could you see, what are some gaps or some challenges you think that we may overlook as we begin to evolve over the next few years?
Okay. Let me take the first one question from retail. There are a lot of things that people with disabilities have to do, particularly when you're talking about when you're talking about going into retail from any different perspective with retail. I can speak, very clearly on a person with vision loss, and I can also speak really clearly on people with mobility issues, because those are personal to me because I have those particular challenges. A lot of other disabilities that you want to take into consideration, particularly when you're talking about retail, is being able to implement an atmosphere that is accessible to people that are coming in. I don't know if you are familiar with UDL, which is Universal Design and Learning. It was implemented from a facility standpoint, but it can be just, put in a lot of different perspectives. So you want to make sure that, for instance, because GameStop is video games, right? Yes. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about video games. Okay. Are you talking about ensuring that your games are accessible to people, or the environment that you go purchase the games?
The retail environment as a whole, not necessarily related to the product.
Okay. So, for instance, so from a facility standpoint, is your building accessible? Can anyone get into your space and still be comfortable in that space? So, for instance, if you're dealing with somebody in a wheelchair, because I recall, my son's here, I know he can validate that my kids loved GameStop when they were little. But I do remember that there are games up high, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what's going to be your protocol for that? How are you going to address that? Are you going to have somebody on hand to run and hand that to that person? So how would you address that issue?
Understood.
Now, see, I have a good one for that one though. I do. So you have all your games. You can keep your shelves. You can keep all your shelves up there and everything. But you can still have those games, like in a little library at the bottom, where you're making sure that, yeah, you can see the game, but the person can also reach the same game and read the back of the box, or however you read those particular games. So you definitely want to make sure that it's going to be accessible to all. If I remember, it's a very noisy environment.
It is.
Okay, so what about somebody who doesn't hear? So do you have something in place for, because I'm only going by what I saw, and this was 12 years ago, sweetie, so I'm only going by what I remember from going into GameStop with my boys. They had like these little games playing up on the screens and stuff like that. So do you have like closed captioning, explaining what this game is? Do you have things like that, ensuring that everything in your store is going to be accessible to anybody who walks through the door?
Understood. So we are implementing those kinds of things over the next few years, this feedback is valuable, thank you.
Okay. Did you want me to ask your second question?
Please.
Okay. In reference to your second question, so if you're looking at it from are you talking about hiring people that are skilled to work in your retail stores?
Either hiring, just what are the challenges or gaps that you see with an organization that's beginning to grow a disability culture? So how can we better cater to those, or change the culture and the minds of others within the organization?
I like how you said that, changing the mind. So that's what you're going to be doing. You're changing that thought process. You're eradicating some of those social stigmas that are associated with people with disabilities, is what you're trying to do, correct? That's what you're trying to do. So, for instance, if you had a gentleman come in, and this gentleman's in a wheelchair, but he's a really good gamer. Isn't that what it's called, gaming? Gamers? He's a really good gamer. He's a really good gamer, and he knows what he's talking about, okay? But your atmosphere is not accessible to him with a wheelchair. So in that instance, that would be one instance where you would be losing a valuable asset because your environment is not going to be accommodating to that asset. So those are the kind of things you have to keep in mind when you're talking about hiring people with disabilities, okay? You have to be able to look at your environment. You have to be able to look at whatever kind of accessibility protocols you don't have in place, like your, however you pay for games and stuff. I mean, because I go to a lot of places that have kiosks where you just swipe your card and pay for something. That's not accessible to me unless it's going to talk to me. So do you have that in place to where if you had a person, let's just say you have a person with a cognitive issue, and the way they filter information in and out is a little bit different. Would they be able to successfully maneuver that process? So those are the kind of things you need to keep in mind from that perspective.
Yes, ma'am, new perspective, thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay, one last question, one more, right up there, just one more question.
Dr. Jordan, as you well know, I work for DART, Mobility Management Service.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Can you address that when we are out and about and we may see someone that have a disability and we have this urge to rush in and help, that is not always wise because some people with disability be offended by that? Can you sort of address that little issue?
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, you definitely need to deal with it on an individual basis, okay? There are certain protocols in place, you know, like if you see somebody with a cane and they seem like they're lost, okay? The right approach would not to be, are you lost? The right approach was, hey, hi, how are you? Because you're giving them an opening to let you know. Because you don't want to be singled out as a person with a disability. So if you're lost, you're really kind of trying to figure out where you are without asking for help. So when you just say hi, then you're giving in that opening. Yes, you're dealing with different individuals, so you are definitely going to face people who will be, you know, really negative because you ask, could you help them? So I would suggest, don't ask, are you lost? Do you need help? Just start up a conversation. Give them the ability to ask you for help instead of you asking to help them. Let me just give you a little instance of stuff that I do at work. I was taught orientation mobility. And orientation mobility is how they teach you how to get around your environment. I'm really, really good about getting around my environment. Anybody from Bank of America here? No? Okay, well, in my environment, I'm really, really good about getting around my environment. Yet, people run to the door, and they'll open the door for me, but I didn't hear the door open. So I'm looking for the door. I'm looking to hit that door, and a lot of times they don't even tell me they opened the door. So you always have to keep in mind that if you're going to do something like open a door for someone, hey, I'm getting that door for you. That let me know that they opened the door for me. So a lot of times, first of all, you have to understand that people with different kinds of disabilities, where we're talking about mobility disabilities, or we're talking about blindness, we're talking about hearing, that most of them have been taught something in order to make accessing their environment more, easier for them. So that's the first thing you have to keep in mind. Second thing you have to keep in mind that you're dealing with individuals. Asking me if I need help does not bother me at all. Because I'm going to say, yeah, I do, or no, I don't, but thank you so much for offering. However, a lot of people are very resentful when you ask them if they need help because you're infringing on, quote unquote, their independence or they're striving for independence. A lot of times people who seem like they're lost are being trained. So you definitely always want to ask those questions. And since you brought that up, I wanted to give you a little scenario. When I was learning how to maneuver my wheelchair and my cane, my O&M instructor took me to North Park Mall. One of the hardest things for me to learn was to ask for help. That was the hardest thing for me to learn because I'm really independent, just didn't want to do it. So she takes me in the mall and she says, go find Dillard's. And I'm like, what? She's like, go find Dillard's. That's going to force me to have to stop and ask someone to help me. So I had enough sight at that time, and I see this group of people, and I go up to them, and I was like, excuse me, can you guys help me find Dillard's? And I get no response. Okay, I'm already hesitant to ask for help, so that just kind of made me kind of shut down. And so this gentleman, and they're still standing there, and so this gentleman taps me on my shoulder, and he says, ma'am, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I was just asking them if they could help me where Dillard's were. And then I guess my cane, he put everything together. And he's like, oh, you can't see. And I'm like, no. He gets really close to my ear, and I'm kind of like, what are you doing? And he says, Oh, ma'am, those are mannequins. So that's just a scenario of how, and it was funny, I laugh at it all the time. My son would tell you that it's one of my favorite stories to tell because it just showed how I was about asking for help. And the first time I'm forced to ask for help, I'm talking to dummies, you know?
Literally. So thank you for the questions. Again, thank you, Ms. Jordan, for your insightful words. I'm going to go ahead and continue with our program. I'm going to invite Mr. Elton Noma Ogar to the stage. Mr. Ogar is Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Intelligence Information Services Division of Raytheon, and Elton will introduce our other keynote speaker for this afternoon.
If we could give another round of applause for Ms. Jordan. So I have the pleasure of introducing one of my colleagues, Christy Mandigo. Everyone hopefully has a copy of the program, yes? And you know, rather than reading all of her bio, I'm going to read a few sentences of it. And I would encourage you, when you have time, to read the entire thing. But then I'm going to go off script a little bit, if that's okay. So if you take a look at her bio, just the first few sentences. Christy Mandigo became an engineer against all the odds. Born with partial paralysis, portions of her brain missing, and spastic cerebral palsy, and later diagnosed with epilepsy, Mandigo wasn't expected to graduate from elementary school and didn't learn how to read until she was 16. Without reading the rest of her bio, think about the power of what is captured in those first couple of sentences. When you close your eyes and you think about what leadership really looks like, what are the things you think about? I know for me, I think about generally 5 things. Someone who is in a position to service others, someone who is a visionary, someone who's strategic, someone who's vulnerable, right? And someone who's willing to speak truth to power, meaning they're willing to have courageous conversations. All those things are within Christy Mandigo. I think about a couple of quotes that I've heard growing up that have been shared to me by mentors, and I'll share a few of them with you. For the students in the room, please take a moment and write these down, because I think they're important as you think about, you know, what you're currently doing and what you might be in the future. The first one, Mark Twain. The 2 most important days of your life, the day you were born and the day that you realized why. I think as you hear Christy's story, and as I heard Mrs. Jordan's story, I thought about that quote. Because the truth is, the day you're born, obviously we all know what that is, our birthday, right? But then the day that you recognized why. Again, what's your purpose? The second quote by Benjamin Franklin. Many people die at 25 and aren't buried until they're 75. Think about that, right? It talks about us not dreaming, us not thinking about becoming more. I can honestly say, with working with Christy, as she's led our employee resource groups at Raytheon, she's someone who's not waiting until 75. Every day she's pushing us to be better. Every day she's pushing us to think differently. Every day she's showing us what true leadership, true inspirational leadership looks like. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Christy to the stage.
Wow. Wow, that was an introduction. Thank you. And thank you very much for having me. I'm going to switch to my slides. Uh-oh. I might need help here. Okay, well, I'm going to get started while the computer gets going. So I grew up in upstate New York on a dairy farm, of all things. My dad and my mom were college Cornell grads, and my dad went and got his engineering degree and decided to farm it for a while. And he was going to do it for about 5 years and then actually, go do something academia-wise. And then I was born. And he farmed it until just a few years ago and retired. So he gave up the dream of becoming, some fancy engineer or some fancy academic, and made sure that I was going to be, successful, if you will. He was one of my advocates. He was one of the ones that said, no, you know what? You can't let her just be in a closet. That's not going to happen. He would go to great lengths. He would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, go milk, go down to the school, talk to my teachers, come back home, make us breakfast, and put us on the bus. Because the teachers kept on saying, no, you know what? She can't be here. She's not good enough. She needs to stop coming here. She can't read. She can't do this. Every day for 3 weeks, my dad went to school and said, can't give up on her. Okay, so that's just kind of setting the stage of some of the things that I started. So again, grew up in a very small town, very overachievers. If you Google Mandigo, you will not be surprised by the overachievers that come up. It was very intimidating once I found out what my family was overachieving. So I learned at a very young age, I was like, oh dear God, what am I gonna do? And mainstream, my parents were, Christy's gonna be in the mainstream. She is going to do this, that she is not going to fail because she will do it. She has grit. As most people know, grit is like a new term. But I had it then in the 1980s. I defined that, and I have it in spades. So failure was not an option. It wasn't an option for me. My parents never enforced the failure upon me. It was always my decision. They always said, you know what? If you want to stop here, we understand. But if you want to keep going, you just let us know. So as most people with special needs, I faced with very similar discriminations as others. Frequently pushed aside, bullied. Bullied with a capital B. I should have put a capital B in that. It was unique because a lot of my disabilities were not seen. I got a lot of pretending. I was able, when I was a kid, this was not that. Because I had surgeries after surgeries and therapy after therapy. So I would just fall down just by walking because I forgot to count. I have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you stand next to me and I stop talking or you stop talking, you'll probably hear me count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I stop, I'm down like a deck of cards. So many disabilities that you have are, physical, intellectual, neurological, sensory, and emotional. I have them all. I have 26 of them. This is what my husband sees. And he says, everybody sees it, the ones on the left-hand side. It's a picture of me with me smiling, big eyes, and happy. That is not what I see. I don't see that at all. I see the stuff on the right. I see an ordinary brain, no damage. That is not my brain. The one on the far right is mine. I was born with a perinatal brain injury. I had strokes almost every single week while I was in my mom's tummy, basically. My right wrist is a bunch of muscles I can't let go. Once this is in my hand, you'll have to take it from me. I will not be providing it to you. You will have to remove it. I love doing this at the airports. It's fantastic. And then my ankle, it's very twisted. I tried to get a better picture, but it's basically I walk on the almost of the top of on my right side of my foot. So my physical disabilities are cerebral palsy. I was born with right hemiplegia, spastic CP, and again with surgeries. This is me. This was not me before surgeries. And now I've done a lot of coping. I've done a lot of therapy 5 times a week, whether it be occupational or physical therapy, hours and hours of therapy. And so most people that look at me today be like, oh, it's not that bad. That's the one I hate. I hate it. It's not that bad. Don't worry about it. Everybody has it worse than you. I love that one. I love it. So the perinatal brain injury I talked about causes a loss of memory, dyslexia, small things. Other learning disabilities, you name it, I probably got some form of it. Epilepsy, the aftermath. So I had a seizure last Friday. I was in the office, sitting down, couldn't walk for 4 hours. As part of that, I also was incapable of repeating myself of what I just thought about 3 minutes ago. I was on the phone with my best friend, and he was like, do you remember what you were just doing 3 minutes ago? No. I was able to work, I was able to do whatever I need to do, but I had to go back and reread what I was doing so that I could remember what I was doing. After 4 hours, I was able to get up, take Uber, go back to the hotel. No big deal. This is my life. Welcome. So neurological. Again, epilepsy. Neurological epilepsy can pretty much fit into all of those categories. I also have a migraine disorder. The migraines get so bad where I am no longer able to see, and I wake up and everything is black, and it's black until I get it back. Thankfully, I have not had, they're not as frequent as they used to be, so which means that my brain chemistry has changed. So they're less frequent than they used to be, so bravo, bravo. Flashing lights, however, have gotten much worse. My work has gotten to the point where they tell me when there is a fire drill days in advance, not the day of, days of advance, because I have to actually prepare, mentally prepare for it. And then if there's an emergency, I have about 5 people on command to come find me. Repetitive noises, like just a server room that's nearby. It's not so good. Seizure City happens most often at night. Crowded rooms, those are always entertaining, especially when everybody is talking at the same time and no one seems to stop talking, ever. And I'm forced in and I'm trying to get to an exit or just trying to get to a bathroom. And I get nervous and I start having anxiety to get to the bathroom because I actually have to go. That crowded room will impact my neurological state quite significantly. And it may not do that that day, but a couple days from then, I'll have a nice little rumble in my brain. So post-traumatic stress disorder, that's a whole different scenario. Like all the ones I've talked about, this is a whole different one. So this I gathered when I was in late high school, early college. Some traumatic experiences happened to me, and all of a sudden, I was no longer able to cope, had to seek help, and I didn't know what was going on. And the doctor was like, yeah, so you have PTSD. I was like, that's possible. I didn't go to the military. And they're like, yeah, so you don't know what PTSD is. So I was educated that PTSD is not just those for veterans. PTSD can happen in all forms of individuals, at all forms of states. And with the impacts of all of my other conditions, at this time when I was 26, this was probably 25 on the list by at that time, my depression started getting out of control. My anxiety started to get increased because my medication increased, and that's a side effect of medication, of course. And then I was having so many seizures in college because I stopped taking my medication so I could pass my classes, that I started having a fear of falling asleep. So then I started getting insomnia because I was having a fear of falling asleep, because I was having seizure after seizure. So yes, so some of these are compiled by fear because of events that have happened in the past. So with all that said, I had this idea when I was growing up that if I could just do one thing right, just something average. Who cares about normal? Because no one's normal. I'm normal. You all are not normal. So if I could just be average, that's all I wanted to be, was average. If I could just do one thing average, then everything would work out. So reading, I was like, I'll just do Hooked on Phonics every summer. I'll just do Hooked on Phonics, and I'll learn how to read, and then I'll prove to the world that I'm average. Did Hooked on Phonics for 13 years. Did not work for me. Just didn't. I tried to grow out my hair and tried to style my hair with one hand. Did not work for me. I begged my mom to buzz my hair off. She let me do a bowl cut instead. That was the trade-off. Learning how to tie my shoes, I got into a lot of trouble in grade school because it was nap time, and I was learning how to tie my shoes. I found out how to tie my shoes during nap time. I got suspended because I was so excited because I learned how to tie my shoes in nap time. But I missed a whole week of school because I learned how to tie my shoes. My mom and dad were so proud of me. They were like, woo-woo, ice cream for a week, which a 5-year-old was like. I learned that I loved vanilla. Putting on pants, very entertaining. Still very entertaining. When I was pregnant and they had the maternity pants, I called my mom up and I was so mad. I was like, are you serious? They have the pull-up pants without the buttons and you didn't tell me about this? And my mom was like, are you seriously telling me that you would actually have gone and, you allowed me to buy them for you? Heck no, that isn't you. You did everything in your power to be average. You wouldn't take anything that was easy. You had to have everything that was average and make it happen. And so these are like just small things. I mean, riding a bike, running. I mean, I was in cross country. I was the slowest runner in New York State. For real. I got in the newspaper for being the slowest runner in New York State. That's a real thing. Ice skating, you know, the nice little seal. Yeah, still can't ice skate. But I always tried. I tried everything to be average. And then I found out that instead, being a chameleon was more fun. I adapt to change. I do feel a lot of fear and shame, still do. I know that I shouldn't. I tell myself I shouldn't, but I do. But knowing that I do and knowing that I feel fear is half the battle. Because, you know, every day I just chip at that wall, chip at that every day. And someday, maybe someone that is me will evolve into not having shame at my age because they'll learn from some of these experiences. I know that my intelligence is very important to me. So knowing that anytime I have a seizure and I have a fear that something intellectually is leaving, my husband and my family knows that that is something that they need to like step back and like evaluate, like, okay, what are we gonna do? That we need, you know, like, go Christy, where's our pom-poms? Come on. So anytime my seizures or any other disability that comes across and it impacts any intellectual aspect of my current state today, the pom-poms come out for my family. Everything else, if I lose mobility, if I lose sight, if I lose all the other areas of my life, they know that those are secondary to my intelligence. So knowing that has helped my family cope with the multiple disorders that I have. I understand that I am not being blamed for who I am. That is something that I know that I'm not being blamed. This is just the way it is. This is who I am, and I am here for a reason, and I'm here to help someone or help something or be here to better the world in some way. I don't know necessarily what it is, and it's not important for me to know exactly why, but I do know that I'm not being blamed for who I am. And I desire to help others. I desire to help my family, I desire to help my company, and I desire to help my friends. Because it's very important to me that others understand that they have value, no matter who they are, what their abilities are, and how they believe they are here on this earth and why. And if I want to do something, I have a passion and it will not die. You can tell me that it's not worth it. You can tell me that I'm gonna fail. You can tell me that whatever. It will not die. I will continue. I will go through so many pains until I find a way to make it happen. It may not be the way you think it's gonna happen or the way I originally thought it was gonna happen, but something is going to happen and I will achieve it. So, as far as high school, Scantrons were very entertaining to me. I was told to quit, mostly because every time I tested in high school, everything was Scantron. It went when I went through school. I know I'm aging myself a little bit. However, I failed every single test. And they're like, so then they took me and they did some kind of IQ test, and they're like, she's not dumb. So what's going on? I couldn't do Scantrons. Everything I did, I did the wrong bubble. I did 2 bubbles on the same row. And they said, like, oh, this is a form of dyslexia. So it was, but I just wouldn't quit. And my mom and dad would be like, well, can't she just do this test a different way? Isn't there just a different way for her to do the test? And they were like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to give her these accommodations. So they started an IEP. And that IEP got a new page, another new page, another new page. And I got this shame. I was so ashamed, like, oh my goodness, my IEP is a whole book. What am I going to do with this IEP? But my parents were like, who cares? No one gets to see it. Well, I grew up in a very small town. Somehow that IEP got out. So, but I came to terms with it, and I just was like, you know what, who cares? Can't read. I can't do these things that are average. I'm going to find a way to do things extraordinary. So I was told no a lot, and I turned them into maybes. I had doctor's appointments every day. I had to fight for everything, and I felt that I had to prove everybody wrong. Especially driving. That was entertaining because my driver's test, when my driver instructor told me to go left, I went right. And then he told me to go right, and I went left. I was the only person that passed that day. And the reason why I was passed was because I was consistently going the wrong way. And then 2 years later, my sister, the genius in the family, failed. She's gonna kill me. I was told that I would never be able to type without using a specific type of device. And I was like, no, if I go to work, they're not going to have a special keyboard for me. Back then, I didn't even know that there were special keyboards that I could bring around to different areas. I was like, I need to figure out how to be able to go to a computer lab and be able to use the same computer keyboard. So I learned how to do one-handed typing. And I just felt like I did everything I could to overcome everything. And then when it came down to graduation and preparing, I was passed over for a scholarship because I wasn't a for sure thing. I was told, oh, yeah, she got through high school. We know that she wasn't supposed to get through high school, elementary, let alone high school. And yeah, we know that she graduated top of her class, but she's not going to get through college. So we're going to give it to someone else. And this wasn't like a $500 scholarship. This was thousands of dollars of a scholarship. And I was passed over because I wasn't a sure thing. So, kind of wallowed, did a lot of wallowing, but decided, you know what? I'm going to find another way. So I still went to the college that I decided to go to, and I just detested anything that had special treatment in college because I thought that was the reason why I didn't get that scholarship, was because I had special treatment. So I started off the same thing, trying to hide in plain sight in a whole different state. So I moved from upstate New York, where I had a support system, to the middle of Ohio in a cornfield, because I felt that if I left the state, no one would know me, and I could just start over and pretend I had nothing. No special treatment, ever. Well, that didn't work out so well. So I tried hiding. Thought it was good for a little while. I wouldn't ask for help. I didn't address my shame. And I thought that I was just being rejected again and again and again. So my grades suffered, and I lied to myself and I lied to others. Like, nothing's wrong with me. It's all in your head. And I would let people just believe what they wanted to believe. And then one day I had a grand mal seizure. Once I acknowledged my issues with my classmates at the Cedarville University, which is in Ohio, my grades went up and I was part of a family. I was in engineering, so I had a whole bunch of guys basically being my big brothers or little brothers, depending on age, I guess. I think I was probably older than them, but they were basically my big brothers. And my shame and fear were under control because they just reassured me that it didn't matter. So, and some of them actually went to all my doctor's appointments. They wouldn't let me go to my doctor's appointments by myself because they thought I was going to self-sabotage. I wouldn't do that, would I? No. But I learned to grow in college, and I learned that I should not go to a doctor's appointment by myself because they were right. I self-sabotage. So here's my college in the middle of the cornfields. It's a lot of windows on a lake. We did a lot of engineering projects that goes over the lake. And my professor that was my biggest advocate for me to continue and learn using whiteboard testing. I mean, I basically did all my testing on a whiteboard. And he probably talked to my dad too. Probably talked to my dad. My dad still, to this day, will remember. Well, he will call me and say, "Oh, you had a seizure last night, didn't you?" For real? Do you really need to know everything? So once I got out of college, it was like, what am I going to do? Right? I mean, yes, getting through high school, okay, you're getting graded, if you fail, you still have your parents. And in college, your parents are kind of helping you through. Yes, I have student loans, but what am I going to do? So I applied everywhere. But I called my uncle. He was in the FBI, and I was like, what do I do, Uncle Charlie? What do I do? And he was like, put everything in your cover letter. Just put everything in your cover letter. Just tell him who you are. Who is Christy Mandigo? Not, is she a girl with an engineering degree? That's not who she is. Yeah, that's just, secondary. But who is Christy Mandigo? Why would a company want Christy Mandigo? They don't want her for her engineering degree. They want her for her grit. They want her for her diverse brain. They want her for not quitting. That's what you put in your cover letter. You disclose your disability. You are proud of your disability, and you are proud of the diverse brain that you have. And I was like, well, what about my GPA? It's like, who cares? Don't put it in there. Let them figure it out. I had so many grand mal seizures while I was going through school. My GPA was in the toilet. So I didn't put it in there. But my resume had everything that I did. And my cover letter did not tell them all the 26 disorders. However, it did tell them the highlights. And it did tell them who I was. And so I was really concerned about it. And I was like, okay. But I just mailed them all in. I mailed in like maybe 50, 60 in all kinds of different, like very, very thick. That was the other thing he told me. He's like, make sure that your resume is thick. Don't just get the paper that like folds easily. Get the thick stuff. So it's hard for them to unfold when you get it out of the letter. And then you do everything online too. You do it both ways. You make the TA folks work. And then I started researching all those companies and the medical benefits because my medication is expensive. I don't know about yours, but mine's expensive. So then I looked at all the different companies and all the accommodations process, and I just waited for the phone. Well, Raytheon called. Magic for me. I can't say everybody had magic. Not everybody's going to have magic, but it was magic for me because Raytheon called. And in July 2003, I was a little surprised because Raytheon's a big company. And I looked at their accommodations package and it was really good. So I was like, okay, this is good stuff. So then I went out to California and they thought my cover letter was pretty impressive. That's the whole reason why I got my first interview. I went back home I got a phone call and didn't get the job. But they called me back. They gave me the second job. And because I impressed them while I was there, because I didn't hide. However, I want you to see this, because this is what it's not the same video, obviously, because this is not 2003, I'm sorry. However, is there a volume?
It's working with one another because it's second nature.
We work together across business units to meet the mission.
Doing something that no one else has done before.
We have a very diverse workforce.
Recognizing that we can accomplish more together than we can by ourselves.
3 little words. We, not me.
Understanding change will be continuous and being able to adapt to that change.
Every day, someone should have that eureka moment.
You have to be able to quickly find the solution.
The pursuit of the best idea, coupled with an openness to doing things differently.
I like the company because I think it stands for something.
We all have a call to action.
To see the things that Raytheon does for our community is one of the reasons why I love being here.
It's an honor, that's what it is.
I was in the military, and to know that Raytheon is out there for families that are in need and making sure that our local kids are set up for success is big, it's every day.
We have a set of values serving as a foundation for our future.
Trust.
Respect. Collaboration.
Innovation. Accountability.
We are one global team
Creating trusted, innovative solutions.
to make the world a safer place.
Okay, so they didn't have, obviously, that video back then. However, they had a very similar video that I watched before I said yes. And the essence of that video, I knew Raytheon was the place for me, because it wasn't just about the accommodations that they were promising me to have. It was that they wanted someone that wouldn't quit and had a diverse brain and would be able to find unique solutions. They used unique, in the video that I remember watching in 2003, they used unique in their video 3 times. And I am definitely unique. So if their business model was associated to being unique, that's the definition of Christy. I'm going to be Raytheon. So even back in 2003, that was for me. And I'm not saying everybody in this room is going to work for Raytheon, because, but please do. But before you actually go and say yes, you're gonna wanna do that research, because you need to know, not just the accommodations process, you need to know that where you go to work is going to fit within your person. You need to bring your whole person into work, because I didn't twice, even when I knew that I could. And just take it from me, it's not worth it, because each time I tried hiding, I didn't ask for help, I had to address my shame again. And if I was honest with myself, I would probably be 5 years down the road of it, even a better job, because I didn't stand in my own way. Because I did. I stood in my own way, in my own career, because I wasn't open with my colleagues, and I was so afraid of being rejected that I didn't ask for the accommodations when I could have a year prior, and I had a couple more grand mal seizures, which take a long time to recover from. So take it from me, don't stand in your own way and in your own career, because it's not worth it. So I do plan on being a senior leader at Raytheon, and I do plan on becoming a great leader at Raytheon. But if I was open, I truly believe I would be further along down that road. So once I got over myself and I was open with who I am, and I asked for what I needed, I partnered with mentors that actually believed me, believed that what I said and what I did and what I needed was real. And I continue to strive and create a culture around Raytheon for my career. And I found a work-life balance. And that work-life balance includes more work than life because it helps my brain. Yours might need something different. You might need to have a different way of working. You might need different hours. You might need a different type of office. But you have to ask, and you have to go through the process, and you have to be willing to go through that process. So talking about my husband is on the left. My 8-year-old, which I think was 7 at this point in the green shirt, then me, and then my redhead in the vest. All are very big supporters of mine. And they all have now figured out that mommy is very unique. Mommy is very unique. So after I went back to school and I got a couple masters, I got married. I actually wouldn't get married until after my masters. I made him wait. He was not happy. But I got married, had 2 kids. Now I have 2 cats. And I love to travel. And my biggest hobbies is Legos and a 3D printer. It was my kid's Christmas present last year. Shh. So my background is engineering, quality, program integrity, or product integrity, program management, and functional management. It's a pretty long list. But when you're starting out, you'll start with one and then you'll accumulate. And you'll start finding out who you want to be and how you want to be in a diverse company. And so this is just my future of what I want to do is I want to become a department manager or a program manager. I want to be a senior leader. I'm going to publish a book. I'm actually writing it right now. It should be published next year. And I want to be president of our diversity group for Global Raytheon at some point. So the actions that I took when I was going through my first round of starting my success at Raytheon was that I was always trying to strive for plan A. I always wanted to be successful the first time out the gate. And I never understood why that was so important to me until I got over myself and I was like, no one gets out of the gate the first time. Doesn't matter how many disabilities or abilities you have. So I take joy in knowing that if I have plan A, plan B, plan C, and plan D in my brain already queued up, that by plan E, I will get it right. But before, when I was only planning for plan A, I would get disappointed. And it wasn't like I would quit, it was just it took me longer. So now that I've gotten to the point where I have plan A through plan D already queued up so that I don't have to stop and wait and wait and wait to find a new plan. I already know, like, if I'm going to, if plan A doesn't work, I already have a plan B and C. So it's very important. So here are some things that I've always liked to tell myself is, I've had a lot of people come to me and pass judgment, good and bad. But I choose to ignore that judgment because I believe now that judgment is just judgment. It's their opinions. It's not reality. You're the only one that can judge yourself. You know who you are, and you know who you want to be, and you know why. So who cares what other people think? And some people say, you know, especially teachers, managers, like, you know, oh, you're the pet. And I think in the back of my head, I'm like, I have colleagues that they're jealous of my success. And I look at them and I'm like, where's your grass on your side? Because my grass is a little bit weird. You really want my seizures? Because if you're going to want my grass, you're going to have those too. Right? And then the worst thing is when people come to me and say, well, oh, your disability isn't that bad. It's, oh, I know someone that has it way worse than you. And I look at them and I'm like, thanks for that. Thanks. Appreciate that. Glad we had that conversation. And I just walk away. Because before, I would get angry. I would get very angry. My face would get all crapped out, and I would leave. I would probably slam the door, and I would go crying in my office, or I would go cry in the classroom or something, and it would ruin the entire day. Now I just find entertainment. Like, who are these people that they believe that saying this is going to ruin my day? Most people don't realize what they say when it comes out of their mouth because they just don't have empathy. And if they do have empathy, they obviously need to go back to Wikipedia and figure out what that definition is. Because it ain't there. It is not what they believe. It is. And the grass is green around my side of the fence because I know how to make my grass green. I don't know how to make your grass green. And I'm sorry that I can't make your grass green. But you can make your grass green. You just need to keep doing it. So Raythan and I finally found a balance. It didn't take too long, but I found a safe environment. The accommodations process, at the beginning, I didn't understand it. I didn't know that I had, that these are like different things I had to do, but I asked questions and I continued to ask questions until I understood the process. And I just kept asking until the answer was something that was satisfying. And I always had, I still have to fight. Just because the accommodations process is there doesn't mean that the accommodations process has everything that is in the catalog. They may not have it there yet because they don't know that I need it yet. So it's worth the fight. It's worth continuing to come back every day. So the one thing I liked about Raytheon is that it takes care of their people. Whether you have a disability or not, they want you to succeed. And if you're asking for the accommodations, they know that it's important to you, and they will evaluate if it's good or not. And if they come back and say no, then you might need to just go back and explain why, because maybe your why was not explanatory enough. So individuals with passion and hard work, ethics, do not go unnoticed. And Raytheon is, I'm just going to go back to the video. I mean, that video, I love that video. So your career is your own. You don't wait for someone else. Never wait for someone else. Find a mentor. Create your goals. Make sure they're obtainable. Make sure they're measurable. Outline your accomplishments. Even if it's just getting up every day this week by 8 o'clock and getting into work by 9. That's an accomplishment. I joke around about getting stickers at work. So one of my employees got stickers at the dollar store that smell. So now I have smelly stickers every time I accomplish something. But those little things are important. And those little accomplishments are key to just finding who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you have time. You're in college. I mean, come on now. I'm 37. I've had a while. So just learn to breathe through the rejections. It will happen if you just keep breathing. And yes, you can breathe. And then you determine which challenges you want to face first and which ones you can mitigate through different planning mechanisms. So be strategic, don't wait, and get involved with the company communities because the company communities will help you. So how to overcome negative change? Be strategic, positive thinking, remove emotion. That's a key, removing emotion. Find a mentor or mentors. Time management and market neurodiversity. Market your brain. Market how you think. And then believe you're not dumb is not easy. I wake up in the morning sometimes and I can't get over some mistake that happened yesterday. And I'm like, oh, that was so dumb. But you have to keep remembering to look in the mirror and just tell yourself that you are worth it and you need to do that. And it's not easy, but you gotta do it. So replace those bad days with accomplishments, and over time, you will see improvement. So I'm going to end with this little video that's kind of lighthearted, but this is me. It's not me, but I did everything in this when I was in, or still do.
Take a right. We're take a left.
Here are a few tips to help you match up your interests and field of studies to the Go to our career site, search for jobs, and then apply to all those of interest. Make sure to check the box that says students and recent graduates only.
I need you to be
This filter will eliminate jobs that as a student or an grad, you would not yet be qualified.
No, that's Legion.
Also, look at the talent areas on our campus recruitment
Hold on.
page and learn about our most common talent areas like engineering.
How would I ever know that? Who knows that?
Sorry.
I need you to be the liaison. Tara, I need you to be the Is that right? Nope, that's Legion.
This is me.
Google, we meet again. How would I ever know that? Who knows that? He is a colonel. How do you spell colonel? You know what? Guess I'm calling her.
It is Maxim.
It's Maximum.
Maxim.
It's Maximum Magazine.
No, it's not. Okay, I'm gonna look this up.
It's
'Cause I can't even.
Maximum
No,
Magazine. Maybe
okay.
there are two different types of magazines.
They're not two different. What does that say? Maxim.
They changed the magazine.
They did not change it. You're just wrong. There's a difference.
Well, it was Maximum for years.
Yeah, babe, you gotta make these grocery lists neater. I can't read this. It looks like 2 mothers and 2 bras. Oh, I know. It looks like you want me to get 2 bras. What you doing?
I am writing a thank you card to my grandma. She sent me soup last week.
Yeah, but that's not what your card says.
Dear Grandma, thank you for the soup. Love you lots, Becky. Dear Grandma, thank you for the soup. Love you lots, Becky.
It says so.
I can't do. That's like my third one.
I know. All right.
Did you see that I wrote 2 others before?
So I've done all of that and more. So my poor family uses Siri when they need help on spelling. My son, 8-year-old. He didn't realize that Siri was part of the family until about 6. So yes, it's entertaining being in my family because we definitely have electronics that have their own names. So thank you very much for having me, and I will give over the mic.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is, again, very inspirational story, Mrs. Mendigo. I'd like to kind of save some additional questions for you during Q&A. For sure, though, what I noticed the most is the passion and the willingness that never dies. That's something that remains with me for sure in terms of your message. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break. Are there refreshments outside? Yeah. Are there refreshments outside? There are some refreshments outside. Again, 10 minutes, and we'll convene, and we'll come back in, and we'll begin after the break with Dr. Richard Scotch. So again, 10 minutes, please.